So let's get started with showing buyers what they want, but giving them what they need. And another way to think about this is that you may have heard me talk in the past about the ham and garlic story. And this came from a guy named Napoleon Hill way back, I don't know, 20s, 30s, 40s, something like that. Wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. But in there, he talks about this little kid who had a dog, and he loved this dog. He had it for a few weeks. His parents got it for him and said, look, you must take care of this dog. It's your responsibility. And so the kid had it for several weeks. And at some point, he had been playing outside with the dog, and he realized the dog had ticks, right? And so he had ticks on him. He was trying to get rid of them, and he knew it was his responsibility. So he was giving him a bath. He was doing all these things he thought was the right thing to do. But the ticks just were staying on the dog. There was just nothing coming off. And so he went and talked to his grandma because his parents were out of town. And he talked to the grandma, and he said, hey, grandma, the dog's got ticks. I can't get rid of them. What can I do to get rid of the ticks that are on this dog? And the grandma said, oh, you got to give it garlic, because when the dog eats the garlic will begin to, seep out of the pores when the dog is sweating, and the ticks won't like it, and they'll jump off the dog, basically, right? And the kid said, okay, great. And so he went away, he got some garlic, and he took the dog outside, and he tried to feed the dog garlic, and it wouldn't eat it. He tried to grab him and put it in his mouth, and the dog's like spitting it out, and then pretty soon the dog's pushing the kid away. And no matter what this kid could do, he couldn't get the dog to eat the garlic. And he was really worried because these ticks are still on him. And he went back to his grandma and he said, hey, I'm trying to give the dog garlic, like you said, which is exactly what it needs to get rid of the ticks, but he won't eat it. And the grandma says, because he hates garlic. What? Yeah, dogs hate garlic. They don't like garlic. They won't eat garlic. What you got to do is wrap the garlic in ham. Dogs love ham. They'll slobber up ham all day long. So you got to wrap the garlic in ham, and then the dog will eat it. So the kid went back and he gave the dog a piece of ham that had the garlic inside of it. And the dog just chomped it right out of his hand, chewed it all up, ate it. A few days later, all the ticks were gone because the garlic was seeping out. The kid gave the dog what he wanted, and inside of that included what the dog needed, right? And not to say that federal buyers are dogs, but buyers are the same way, right? They want the ham, but they need the garlic. Often they want what they want. They just see this thing I want, but they don't realize all this stuff that goes in and what they need. And what I want to help you do is to understand that we have to deal with our customers that same way. When we're talking with them, we need to understand that ham, because if we're gonna suggest the garlic, right, the process, what you need, then we need to know how will they receive it best. And this is where I'm kind of tying it back to persuasion. The ham is persuasion. I give it to you, I wrap it in ham, you love it, right? Or whatever it is you like from the government buyer standpoint. And let me just bring it back to us, right? Most of you who are on this are in the federal government space looking to make sales, right? And so our ham is sales. You're here, for example, perhaps for the training that says, how can I wow federal buyers and win more contracts? That's the ham, that's the sale, right? And I'm telling you, you can have that. There's the ham, there's the tasty thing. But before you can have that, you must do the other 6 steps of the process. You must write winning proposals. You must find slam dunk opportunities. You must build strategic relationships, right? You must call enough people, 100 or 200 people, until you build strategic relationships, right? And you must identify who are the best people to call in order to build relationships. And in order to do any of that, you need to be doing research so you can learn which program offices are the best ones to go to. How can I learn about what they want? An example of what somebody wants when you think about research is in a strategic plan. You can go in there and they will be talking about their strategic goals. They'll be talking about agency strategic priorities. These are not requirements that you're going to see in a PWS, right? They can't be broken down into a requirement because they're too big. They're strategic goals. Well, that's what they want. They want world peace, right? The VA, they want to end veteran homelessness. That's a want that they have. That's their ham. Or we also call it Maui sometimes, right? You want the trip. You want Maui. You just don't want all the details of traveling to Maui, 15-hour flight, whatever it is, right? But you want that thing at the end. For us, it's sales. For the government, it's these strategic objectives, strategic goals. And research allows you to understand that better and then begin to tie it back to the opportunities that you're pursuing. So one of the steps I talked there is having strategic relationships. When you talk about uncovering what a customer really wants, right? Only when you know what they want will you be able to wow them. If you give them what they need, you're not going to wow them because everybody's going to give them what they need, right? What we consider shall statements. The seller shall do this, the contractor shall do this, right? The task areas are laid out really specifically. Those are all just the specific requirements, but that's not going to wow them. The only way you can wow them is by having relationships. And this is why we say, right, in federal market, really in any sales, but you need to have strong relationships in order to win more. Yes, you can propose and to bid without relationships, and yes, you can sometimes win, but you're not going to win as consistently and as largely as you want without having relationships, because through relationships is where you can explore what you learned in strategic documents about their goals and their priorities. You can learn about what they want, right? You can learn about that ham. So if you understand the value of that ham and garlic story, do me a favor, just put ham and garlic into the chat. Let me know you're following along with this idea of give them what they want in order to get them to take what they need. So as you're doing that, let me switch back here really quick. Be quiet, Russ. Russ is in from Hawaii. He's like, Maui's only 20 minutes away from him. It's like 5 years away from me. Okay, so let's talk about continuing this idea, right? How do you uncover the ham or throughout the life cycle? How do you uncover that area that'll give it the wow? And so one part I already talked about, and I'm just going to show this graphic again because it's really important for you to lock onto this graphic about the 7-step process, right? At each stage of the game, you can be doing something that will bring the wow. And I just want to make sure you're looking at this as we move forward. But I already talked about research, right? Research is about looking at strategic documents and trying to understand what the big picture is for that government buyer. So the more you understand that, the more you can explore it with your customer when you're talking with them. The second part is targeting, right? As you're looking at targeting, it's not just about pulling names out of GovWin or wherever, but it's determining who do I really want to talk to. And it's not just small business professionals and contracting officers who really aren't as dialed in to the wow factor or the ham or the really big goals of a proposal office. They've got their own needs. So you want to get into the proposal office, but you also want to find other vendors who are in there. They're great people to begin to build that relationship with so you can learn from. So targeting is about finding those right people who can lead to it, right? In outreach, that's about picking up the phone. So you just got to make sure you're doing that. But in strategic relationships, the part I want to really drive home here is that you've got to have these calls that are consistent calls, these relationships where you're building. I talk about a true relationship is one where you're having dialogue with that other person at least once a month, if not every 2 weeks. You've got a regular meeting coming in, or you've got a regular clip, a federal buyer. Maybe you're waiting 2 or 3 weeks out, but if you have a good meeting with them, then you should be able to come back, right? So if you're doing business development or capture, right, both of those engage research, targeting, and outreach just for different outputs. But when you have conversations with the program office, you're going to be discussing your products and services, but you want to do it around their needs. And a way to do that, if you haven't heard me talk about this before, is spin selling. So spin selling is a sales methodology. SPIN is a acronym for situation, problem, implication, needs, payoff questions. These are 4 types of questions, and situation questions are factual. I'm not talking about those today. Problem questions are about uncovering what the challenges are they're running into. Really, it's clearly defined, right? What problems are you running into, your pain points? But implication questions on that SPIN methodology, implication questions are about the consequence of the problems they run into. When you get a PWS that comes out, they'll often talk about the problems. We have this problem. We want these task areas, these potential solutions is basically what they're saying. Here's our requirements to our problems, but they are not telling you what the consequences are. If a CISO shop is having to deal with all sorts of malware hits or something, right? There's a lot of vulnerability in a PWS for that work. They're not going to be talking about all the different departments within their agency that are negatively impacted by this and which ones are getting hit by more. And so when you're going in and having conversations with a customer, you want to ask these questions around implication the implication of a problem. I have separate training you can go look at that really digs into the problem and implication questions approach to having a meeting. But like I said, you want to have multiple meetings. So over the course of several months, 3, 6, 12 months, you're doing capture. I'm not here to really train you today for people who are just responding to an RFP. I'm talking about capture and business development. How do you win? You win by doing work right early on, sales. But the one I wanted to just point out is, and I don't talk a lot about, is talking about the need payoff, helping a customer understand what you're talking about, the solutions you're talking about, how that would help solve their problems, right? What they're trying to get done. And I just want to give you a couple of examples of need payoff questions that could fit in here. So one example, if you're talking with a customer and they're talking about they have a high level of cost, right? I might ask a question, or I might write it down this way and then ask it a little bit more ad hoc when I'm in there. If we could help you reduce cost, who else would be helped, right? How will reducing cost on this type of work help anybody else, right? And so they might say, if I reduce cost, that's great because the president has required a 5% reduction of everything. We hit our goal. Or they might say, if you help us reduce costs here, well, other departments within our agency could then use that money for their mission because they don't have enough money or whatever. You're exploring who else could be helped. You're getting them to think to themselves, it's not just about reducing cost, but if you reduce the cost, then where would you spend that money? Would you give it back to the taxpayer? Not likely, right? What would you do with that money? Well, we would put it to another priority. And this goes to another example of a needs payoff type question, is if your users could increase output, how would that help you? So one is about reducing costs. Now you got some extra money. The other is about I reduce the amount of time it takes your people to do the job they're doing. If I reduce what somebody is doing or what your team is doing by 50%, how would that help you? What would you do? I don't want you to just think about the fact that your people are working hard and I reduce their workload or the time it takes to do their workload by 50%. I want you to then take it further and go, well, what would we do? Well, you know what? We've got this other priority project about supporting veterans or something that we haven't been able to get to, not because of money so much as our team is just too busy. You can't keep throwing more money at us because at some point it's still the same group of us who are leading it. But if you can reduce our the time it takes for us to do our current work, then we could shift the other 50%, let's say, of our hours to this new project, which would then impact veterans in this way, would achieve these kind of strategic objectives. You want them to think about that because when you get to the proposal, you can be alluding to that within your proposal far different than any of your competitors. Your competitors will say, we'll work on the problem, we'll help you reduce the amount of time it takes to do something or increase output on your team, right? We're all going to say that. That's a compliant type of way of driving at the proposal. But if you've had this conversation, you could then sit there and say, by reducing this, we expect your agency will be able to shift and take on this project. And now you're getting them to see that you understand them, right? Going back to that whole idea of they want to feel understood by you. Well, you're helping them feel understood. If they see in your proposal, you walking your solution and the savings and benefits all the way back to something else that they need to get done. So it's a really good thing to be driving down in the spin questions and uncovering those needs and the payoff for them when they solve the needs with your solution or your product. So if you understand, though, that relationships are fundamental to all these conversations and they're vital to uncovering that the need, the ham that's in there, put relationships into the chat. Just let me know that you understand that relationships truly are vital to you having increased success. I don't want to say you can't have success without relationships. That's just brutal, right? But if you have relationships, if you build strategic relationships, you will have more success. And so put relationships into that chat as I move into the 3 tips I want to give you on how you can add wow to your proposals or persuasion into your proposals. And I've done whole trainings, right? This is coming out of just single modules of whole training I've done around this idea of capture. And so I'm just giving you 3 tips out of this, but these are 3 good tips to think about when you're trying to add wow back into your proposals. First one is drink water. This is fun stuff, but it's thirsty. Okay, so my first tip for you is follow a DevOps approach, right? If you're not familiar, Agile is a project management methodology loosely, right? And it's used heavily in software development, so Agile software development. And it's just this way of doing things in a much smaller way. I'm doing this thing, this thing, this thing, instead of trying to look at the whole big picture, plan it all out, and then begin. We just said, let's get started, and we'll think about it as we go. Kind of build an airplane while you're in flight. Well, a DevOps approach is a spinoff a little bit of that in the thinking. And DevOps, all it means is Dev stands for development, the software developers, and Ops stands for operations, the people who put that software application into production. So think about your timekeeping system that you use. Somebody built it, and somebody else is making sure it's running and working all the time. In the old days, there used to be this wall in between. The developers would build it, throw it over the wall, go celebrate how great they did, right? And the operation people would have to implement it, have problems with it, and the users were mad, and they would take all the blame. And basically what we all said was, hey, why don't we do DevOps, bring it together, get rid of the wall, and have the operation people work at the very beginning of application development, so they're providing input about issues that might come up. And why don't we make sure the developers stay with the application all the way till customer satisfaction? And I encourage you to do the same thing. Think about capture and business development are the developers, and proposal managers, proposal team, proposal writers are the operational people, right? Just two sides of this exact same task, which is sales, but coming together. And so my first tip for you is loop your proposal team in from the very start. Let them know what you're doing. And I don't mean formally, don't put a policy in place saying, hey, you must be engaged. I'm saying collaboratively. They want to be engaged. The proposal people want to be able to write proposals that win. They don't want to write proposals that don't win. And it's not all dependent on them. They know that a huge portion of it depends on your capture efforts and business development efforts. And so loop them in from the very beginning. Make sure they understand that what you're trying to do when you're talking to the customer is to do far more than compliance proposals or compliant proposals, but you want to do convincing proposals that are persuasive. And the way you're going to do that is by learning about their goals, what they're trying to get done, problems maybe they're not even stating. And so by looping them in, you get rid of this barrier that sometimes happen where capture does their work. They pass the opportunity at RFP to the proposal writers, and then they do whatever they want. Like they just write a completely compliant, beautiful, perfect proposal that is not convincing. It's not their job to be the convincing ones. It's the people ahead of this time. And that's why I'm saying, get your team to work together in a DevOps approach. The second tip I want to give you is ask yourself along the way two main questions. Why is this important, and who else would benefit? Why is this important, and who else would benefit? So as you're having and I would write that down as two standard questions on your call plan, because you go into meetings with call plans written down, right? When you go in with a call plan, always make sure those are two guiding questions you're asking program managers. When they say something, think to yourself or even ask them outright, hey, can I pull a thread on that? Why is it important that this happens? Can you explain a little bit more? Okay, cool. Who else would benefit, right? Don't ask it exactly that way every single time. But when you have those two down, we call it pulling a thread. It's really, you're just trying to learn more. Really, I don't get pulling a thread though, because that's kind of destroying something, but that's separate, right? But this idea of exploring a topic more and more, you want to do this when you're in business development and you have no opportunity and you're just understanding the agency, right? You're discussing what your company does around their needs. You want to do this in capture when it's tied to a specific opportunity. You're pulling those threads by asking, why is this important? Why? Who else would benefit? But also after your meeting, make sure you're asking yourself, and if you went with somebody else to the meeting, hey, they were saying this stuff. Why was that important? Why? Who else did they say would benefit? If you can't clearly articulate that to yourself in a conversation, then go back to the person and say, hey, can I follow up? We were talking about this, but I didn't get that. Most people are super nice. Excuse me. They'll come back and say, sure, let's talk about it more. And this goes to my third tip. My third tip is you must learn how to write summaries, 1 page or less, not notes, but summary pages. Think about it like a mini essay or an executive summary about what you just explored with a customer. If you're going in for business development meetings or capture meetings, then there should be an objective and a purpose and a set of questions you're asking. Well, that set of questions and objectives, that should lead to the outline of what you might write. so that you can share that with your colleagues, share that back with the proposal writer, proposal team by saying, hey, we went in and we were talking about data analytics or their data pipeline and the needs that they have around data. And as we had conversations, they talked about this. And so you can write it up, current situation. And I don't want to be the one who gives you the outline flat out. There's all sorts of writers who can give you really good proposal writing tips. But the idea is to write what you're learning right when you learn it so that you can share it with your proposal writing team. You're able to move this forward. You're bringing forward true customer intel, right? You're understanding that customer very well. But if you just go in and have a meeting and come out and you don't write anything down except for a couple of bullets, well, then what was the value? What was the purpose? You went in there to get something. Don't change yourself by not writing it down. And so learn how to write summaries. And if you don't know how, just put it out on LinkedIn, put it into this community. Hey, can anybody give me tips on how to write summaries? And people will do that. I'm going to bring in a couple of guest speakers to talk on that as well, because I think it's such a great topic. But if you understand that in order to wow the buyer, you must gather various perspectives from within that program office, various meetings, and learning for it, do me a favor, in the chat, just put wow the buyer. In order to wow the buyer, you must understand them. They must feel understood. So put wow the buyer into the chat. As a recap, we talked about showing the buyers what they want, but giving them what they need. I talked to you about the difference between compliant and convincing proposals. Everybody's compliant, be convincing. And then the third thing I talked about was how you can work to win proposals at each stage of the sales lifecycle. You should be looking at each stage and go, what can I do in here that will help me win the proposal? Here's my tip for you, the action tip going away. Help your buyer feel understood. Go read the agency strategic plan for your target agency. If you've got a top opportunity, go find the matching strategic plan for that agency for that op. If you found this training valuable, do me a favor, throw thanks into the chat. Make sure you throw in Cecilia and Gus as well, because I do not do this alone. And if you'd like to be part of our Business Development Accelerator Workshop, our BD Accelerator Workshop, starting on Monday, send me a message in LinkedIn. The workshop's for companies that are a little farther along, $1 million, $2 million in revenue kind of stage, and who are looking to get to the next level, willing to do what it takes to get to the next level. If you already got back to me, I've been a little out of gas this week, right? I'm going to be reaching back to those of you who got reached out to me. I'll get back to you today and follow up. Remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you at the next training.